shake hands with each other and everything like that. But I find an easier way is actually after you've ground the knife, in other words, you pull the shoulder out, you want to create a smoother edge. And I've found that if you just run the knife again fairly flat, or as flat as you can get it, just to smooth your bevel in. Now the most important part of these knives, or this particular knife, isn't here. It's from there up. And this blade, this edge here, actually moves away from you all the time when you're trying to put pressure on it to put your edge in. See, it's there. So you'll find if you do this, just smooth it out, come back this side and do the same thing before you actually try and put your edge in. Now, once you do this once, it's just very easy, just with 2 wipes, to put your edge back when you actually need to when the knife goes blunt. So to put your edge in, just lift it. Give yourself about 1/8 of an inch off the back of the spline and just run it through, and make sure you go right through to the tip. You have to go through the tip because that is the most important part of the knife. What I like to do is to put my 3rd finger on the actual tip of the knife itself, so that when we're going through, that finger actually controls or guides and make sure you stay right on the plate. Now, we'll just touch this up with the 1000 grit rod. Just give it a couple of light strokes. This rod is fantastic for boners. It comes with a plastic handle, and you'd never ever have a blunt knife while you're working on a chain. No. Boning knives. Skinners are exactly the same. There's basically no difference. If you take that knife and compare it with that, apart from the sweep up here, they both have very, very curved edges. Now, with your Skinner, the idea is that they're thick up here, and if you're going to work on them, work so that you pull the shoulder out, but you go all the way up to the top of the knife, right up here, and thin this edge out here, right there, because you won't have, you'll have no trouble with the knife at all if you do that, particularly in a working situation where you're working with the knife itself. A lot of the abattoirs actually have linishing belts that do this, so you know, as far as grinding it, there's no great hassle with it, except just make sure you don't overheat the knife. That's really all I want to say about Skinners. This is an Gustav Emmelern bread knife. It's got a good 10 or 11 inch blade on it, and it's got extremely deep serrations. Now once these go blunt, with your serrated edge knives anyway, you've got a problem actually sharpening them if you don't know basically what to do. Now, a serrated edge knife is nothing more than a single bevel edge. So basically, if you have a diamond rod, you can do maybe this even with a chainsaw file. I've never tried it, but I think it would probably work. If you have a diamond rod, you simply start here. This is the quick way of doing it. And you simply work your serrations until you bring your burr up on the back of the knife. There it is there. It's a raised burr. And then all you do is, up here, this is parallel, you simply work the knife here and take out your burr without increasing your angle. You just completely lay it flat and rub your burr out. Sharp knife. As you can see, serrated edge knives have a sawing action. But if it'll cut through that, it'll cut through bread. Done. There are more different types of pocket knives that you can buy than any other single item anywhere in the world. They come in all shapes and sizes. You've got the Swiss Army type. This one is based on an old-timer type knife, which was, this could be a buck, a big old-timer, a Camillus, whatever you like, it doesn't really matter much. This is a German knife, very thick in the blade. They come, you know, you've got all types, different types of knives, the whole thing. One of the problems with you've got with knives, particularly in this country, is that the average guy on the land or the average bloke in the city buys crap. And you will buy a $5, $2 Chinese knife. You buy Pakistani knives that come from Pakistan. And basically these knives come to you with no edges whatever at all. I've probably sharpened more blunt pocket knives than any man in the world, and if that's any claim to fame that I've got, it's probably that. I've sharpened more blunt pocket knives than any man in the world. Now, knives generally, when you get them, they have what's called a factory edge. Now that runs from being totally blunt because the guy was drunk the night before he was supposed to sharpen them, ranging through to about 1/3 sharp. There's only one that I've seen decent edge on any knife, or two decent edges I've ever seen. One is on a Henry Boker, the brand new Henry Boker knife, which is German, and they're probably the best mass-produced knife in the world. That's only my opinion. And when you get your basic edge on a Swiss Army knife, that is the genuine Victorinox Swiss Army knife, the edge on that knife is absolutely brilliant. It will shave a mouse to sleep. Now that is because they put a very, very wide angle on the knife, and once that edge goes, you've got problems. So if you've got a Swiss Army knife of any description, you know, or Chinese knife or whatever, this will be a good segment for you to watch because I'll show you exactly what you're going to have to do. Now, why do guys have blunt pocket knives? One reason is that a knife seems to be treated with a great deal of reverence. This is an absolutely beautiful knife. This is a Gustav Emelern. It's an 8-inch chef's knife. Now, when you get this from the factory, this will cut, but the edge can be improved about 8,000%. To improve it, you actually have to scratch the surface of the knife. Now, a lot of guys don't like their knives being scratched. So, of course, we're in a situation there where, you know, if you don't want to scratch the knife, it'll basically always be blunt. So you really have to scratch the knife, dress it up, get rid of the shoulder, and then you'll be home free. Now, I'm going to do a few of these knives here, these pocket knives. And this one was given to me by the producer of this particular video, and it's never been sharpened in its life. It has a big nick in it here, and frankly, the way for you poor buggers out there with knives is booby-trapped, because they're not designed, they're only designed basically to look good. You know, that's an attractive looking knife. But in terms of having an edge on or anything like that, forget about it. It just, you know, unless you really, really work it, you've got no hope in the world. Now, you can do it on a grinder. You can do it on a linishing belt, but the risk on a grinder, of course, is A, to use a grinder you've got to be good, and B, you can overheat the knife, so you can buy a stuffed knife and then totally stuff it. This knife here, this is a copy of a Swiss Army knife. This is actually made in Germany, and it's a German Swiss Army knife. Now, we have Chinese Swiss Army knives. They're the ones the poor little kids buy. They cost them $10 and, you know, they fall apart and everything like that. And frankly, I'd recommend you strongly you don't buy them, even though they are cheap, because they're a heap of garbage. This knife virtually has no edge on it at all. This is how it comes from the factory. It's blunt. I mean, you know, you can run your fingers up there without any trouble in the world. This particular knife, there's 8 million different shapes of this, you know, made all over the world. This is hollow ground. So they've got a thick piece of metal here. This is, and then they pull that right out there, but they still haven't sharpened it. This one, well, that's you know, you just close it up, put it in your pocket. I've actually nearly sharpened this thing, but it can come up a hell of a lot better. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grind this knife. I'm going to take the maker's name right out of it and take that big bevel right out of the knife. Now, if you can see there, we're starting to change the shape of the blade here. We're getting this thickness out of it here, which you must do if you want it to sharpen. The steel on this knife isn't too bad, actually. Right, well, we've got the shoulder right out of that. Now, this is, I love this rod. This has sharpened so many knives for me, it's just not funny. All you do with the rod is you just come up just a fraction more and just remove a little tiny bit more metal. And what we're doing here is we're putting in a smooth bevel. We've already covered what bevel is. And it's a smooth, even one that'll go the full length of the knife. Then we just come up a little fraction more and put our angle in right at the bottom of the thinner blade. You've still got a bevel there, but it's right at the end. You'll notice when I use this in a similar fashion to a steel, it's when I'm just putting an edge in. You don't wave it around like Uncle Charlie used to do. Now, this rod is for a guy who can sharpen a knife, who wants a sharper knife. And all I do with this is just simply basically do the same thing. Smooth steel. Just went through my thumb. That's one out of the road. Okay, well, as promised, I've worked out these blades, given them the going over for you, and I thought I'd leave this aluminium Dewey knife as it was when it came from the factory and show you what I've done with the stainless steel one, which basically has the same blade. As you can see here, in laying the knife flat, I've pulled totally the shoulder right out of the knife. This goes back around about a quarter, or not quite a quarter of an inch, right up into the tip. And this is both sides of the knife, up here. And we've changed the angle considerably compared to the bevel that was on it like this. It now comes down like that and the bevel goes in right at the bottom of the blade. I've been sharpening these knives like this for 5 years, and the guys that I do them for just absolutely love them. They just can't believe the difference. To do that knife took from go to woe approximately 4 to 5 minutes. That's it. Now, as you see with this one, it's still, your bevel angle is down here, and it's still very thick in relationship to its actual length and thickness. It's very thick down the bottom. This skinning knife, I've pulled the bevel right out, pulled the shoulder right out of there. As a matter of fact, it's scratched just above Rob Dewey's name here. That's because I laid it flat. Now, this other side is exactly the same thing, flat on both sides. Occasionally you might find that when you look at the grind on the knife that this may be a little bit more than that. Don't worry too much about that. Try and get them as even as you can. You know, don't, if it's out a millimetre or 2 mil, it's not going to matter a rat's ass. The other important thing that I thought I would mention while we're at this is that when I say lay the knife flat, I'm just going to stand up here. Some guys think laying the knife flat is laying the knife flat. You see, here. But the surface of the knife has to be in touch with the cutting surface. So the actual edge of the knife has to be in line with the cutting surface. So if you're going to lay the knife flat, particularly on this hollow ground knife, it works off the top of where they started the hollow grind, not the actual surface here. I mean, you know, if you'd laid it flat there, you know, you're there for 4 years. I mean, you wouldn't even forget about it, you know. But I just thought I'd mention that. Another thing too is in the original a bit of whiteboard that I did, you notice that there was a 25-degree included angle on the board. Now, included angle means this, the angle of 25 degrees. Now, that is only possible on very, very, very thin-bladed knives. And if you keep your average knife to between 20 and 25 degrees to your finishing surface, that will give you the best results that you can get. Somewhere between 20 and 25 degrees. If it's 25.6 because you're doing it by eye, don't worry about it. You know, it's not all that important. The most important thing is that you thin the blade out and then put your angle in right at the bottom of the actual bevel, right on the edge itself. We'll just continue with these. This is the knife you saw me do, and what you've got here is I've totally taken the shoulder right out of that on this side, and I'll turn it around, taking it right out on that side. Now you'll find the grind here and the grind there are totally different, mainly because it is the way the knife is. No more than that. The other important thing too is that you must concentrate on your tip in all knives. It doesn't matter what, whether you're looking at chef's knives or skinners or boners. Thin the tip out because knife manufacturers make the tips too thick. So even if you change an angle and turn the knife over flat and rub your tip before you put the edge in, you'll get much better results out of your knives. This one here, this is the common garden variety knife. You'll see here it's ground almost right up the top of the blade, right up here on both sides. This facilitates much easier edge putting in ability. That thing's like a razor now. Now this little monster, the steel in that is that hard that it actually took longer to do this than it did to do the Dewey knife. Now you wouldn't believe that, would you? But if you have a look at the actual knife itself, it's ground to within a 1/16 of an inch, or nearly actually about an 1/8 of an inch from the surface right through to the tip. I've had it dead flat because you can see the amount of scrubbing that I've done up the top of the blade here. I'll just turn it over so you can have a look at the other side. And then we put the edge in there. Now that knife, I wouldn't dare run down my thumb without any worries in the world, because that will cut you right through and go straight through. Now, I've purposely left this knife to show you that you can actually put a good edge in on the existing bevel angle that's on the knife itself. Now the problem is that when that goes blunt, this will cut, no hassles in the world. This will cut, it'll do the job for you and everything like that. But with the angle that's on it, the minute it goes blunt, it's extremely difficult to actually resharpen without doing what I've done with these. So you can get away with it to start with, but to do it properly, this should be scratched right through here, and that will come back to about there, say 1/4 of an inch off the actual the edge of the knife. If you do that to start with, you know, it might be 6 months before you have to regrind it. But if you don't do it, that's basically what you're stuck with. And a knife like that deserves the best treatment it can get, because it's actually a very handy knife. I've decided to include this in the segment after pocket knives as a finish to what we're trying to do here. And back in an earlier segment you would have seen on the board 25 degrees included. Now included is the total angle of the knife itself. So in other words, if you're looking at the knife and you measure the angle of the knife this way, 25 degrees, or down here, 25 degrees. Now, we were going to do a segment on filleting knives, and that actually was what that related to, an angle like that. But if you really think about it, the finishing angle on a knife is, or a workable angle, is determined by the depth and thickness of the knife or the chisel or the plane blade or whatever it is that you actually are trying to sharpen. For example, this paring knife, I'll just put that there. If you try and put a 25 degree angle on that, you haven't got a hope in the world, particularly if you use the accepted method of what an angle on a knife is, which is here. You see here's 90 degrees, there's 45, and here's half of 45, 22.5. So 25's up here somewhere. Now this is actually the angle that is where the knife blade wipes across your diamond plate or your finishing medium, whatever you like, a diamond rod or a diamond plate or an Arkansas stone, it doesn't make any difference. This is the accepted thing, anything under 25 degrees. But with that, you probably have to run a finishing angle of 10 degrees on the knife, finishing down here, because the blade is so thin. Now, when you get into chef's knives, the back of a chef's knife is this thick. Now, if you try and put a 10 degree angle on that, or a 25 degree included angle on that, you're in for a lot of grinding, and frankly, it would be not so much impossible, but it would be totally impractical because of the way that and the amount of work and heavy cutting work that chef's knives have to do. Now, as you go back to the skinners are thinner than chef's knives. And so you've got to compromise. The depth of the knife and the thickness of the knife determines the finishing angle. And this is why you have to grind an enormous amount of metal out of these knives to actually get a long-lasting razor-sharp edge. This one here, pardon my wonderful artwork here. This is actually a demonstration of what the paring knife should look like. I couldn't get a very thin line there, but you get the idea. So in other words, the thinner the knife, the narrower the angle you can actually put on it. The thicker the knife, in relationship to the thickness of the back, you can use a wider angle, but it will still give you the same effect as a narrow angle on the actual small knife. I just really want to make that clear. This is why it's impossible for someone to say the correct angle for any knife is 20 degrees. The correct angle is 25 degrees. The correct angle is 22.5. People who say this kind of really and truly, you know, have got rocks in their head. It depends entirely on the thickness and the depth that knife is actually constructed to. That's probably the wrong English, but it doesn't matter. I think you've got the message. So I just want to make that clear, that anything under this is very workable. So in other words, if you have got a chef knife and you find that you sharpen it there like that, which is around about 17 degrees, and it works for you in what you're doing, that's the angle you sharpen at. The thing we're trying to get away from is steepness, getting right up the top here. Get the shoulder out and put the angle in that works. Now, if you find that you go down to such an angle where the blade is too thin and it starts to chip out on you, that's just about optimum. If you come up a little bit steeper from there, you'll find that you'll have a very, very good angle. Another thing is that if you really want to test a knife to see how it works for you, in other words, if you're cutting meat and it cuts through meat beautifully and you don't have any worries, use whatever you got that angle there. You know, if it doesn't work in meat, in other words, it feels sharp and everything like that, but it actually doesn't cut properly, you can go a little bit steeper or maybe a little bit narrower until it actually does. It's a matter of trial and error, and no one can tell you exactly what angle goes on every knife. I'll give you a classic example of this. Right, if you compare this knife, this Emelern chef's knife, the 8-inch, with this chef's knife, you've got two entirely different beasts totally together, because this one is half the depth of that. It's also about 2/3 as thick. So this knife could be razor sharp with a slightly wider angle than this one. This one, would, by the looks of it, with the amount of metal that needs to come out of it, which isn't much, you could probably run a 15-degree angle to the hone. Whereas this one, to run a 15-degree angle on it, you would have to pull the metal all the way back, totally right up the top here, which is a very long job. So again, this is all I'm trying to say to you, that the depth and thickness of the knife determines the workable angle that you can put on the knife. I hope that clears it up for you. What you see in front of me is a chainsaw bar. It's got a 732 chain on it, and it's actually a demonstration bar for an on-bar chainsaw jig that I used to sell many, many years ago. I actually have a confession to make in that about 10 years ago, the first chainsaw I ever sharpened was on I've got a McCulloch Promax 750 chainsaw. Bloody ripper it is. And I went by the book and spent 3 hours being very expert at sharpening this particular saw.